And good morning, everybody. Russ Lewis here in the KHOU newsroom. Glad you're with us on all of our digital platforms today. We normally don't do this. We don't do a deep dive into an international story like this. But what's going on in Iraq and Iran right now is just so impactful, not only to what's happening overseas, but us here in the States, that we brought in an expert here that can answer your questions and some of mine as well. Joe Barnes is his name. He's a Bonner Means Baker Fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute of Public Policy. And he spent 15 years at the State Department as well before you joined academia. We appreciate you being here, Mr. Barnes. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You're busy, aren't you? You're a popular guy today.
Yes, in fact, it's about the only time in the last 12 months anybody's been interested in me at all.
Well, we're happy you're here. We're very interested in what you have to say. So, the president orders an airstrike, drone strike on Qassem Soleimani, who was Iran's head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is kind of like our special forces, I think. This is the wreckage there at the airport that took him out in Baghdad, actually in Iraq. Let me just start with a maybe not so simple question, but just a big picture view of this. Do you share the same concern I've heard from a lot of analysts saying this is very significant and puts Americans in danger both at home and abroad?
Well, this is a big deal. There's no denying it. It's huge news. It marks a substantial escalation in ongoing tension between the United States and Iran. The most recent round of tension began when President Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal and embarked on what they call a maximum pressure campaign against Iran. So it is a big deal. Soleimani was an important man. He's not a very good man. He's not a very nice man. In many ways, he was a wicked man. Mm-hmm. But he was a huge figure, not just in Iran, where he's the head of the Al-Quds Force, which is the sort of paramilitary arm of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Would you say the second most powerful man in Iran?
Some people say that, but it's not inconceivable to say that. I would certainly say this. In terms of the broader Middle East, he's a hugely influential figure, not just within Iran, but outside of Iran.
Because he has his hands
everywhere.
In all these other conflicts going on in Syria, in Yemen, all over the place, right?
Right. Now, he's basically the man who's been running Iran's sort of proxy wars abroad, notably in places like Iraq and Syria, and as well, don't forget Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And he's been quite successful at what he's done. I mean, he's been a very, very successful military leader in terms of, and he's sort of a very, very successful at what you call asymmetric warfare, which is warfare that doesn't necessarily depend upon standing armies and columns of tanks. He's very good at organizing militia and organizing proxies to act on Iran's behalf.
So on the ground, he's in other countries, and he's getting some guys together to carry out some sort of operation, or a continuing maybe a specific attack, or a continuing operation.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes that those activities have found him in de facto alliance with the United States.
He helped take out ISIS.
He helped take out ISIS. ISIS was defeated in part by Shia militia. I mean, Kurds, just, remember the Kurds and the key role they played. We're talking about Iraq here. But the Iranian militias were critical in turning back the initial surge of ISIS in Iraq.
I want to remind everybody who's watching here, and again, we're doing a deep dive on this. We're all learning about this as we go along, but if you have any specific questions, write them in. Jaime, our digital producer's over there watching what you're saying, and when one comes in that we're not answering, you want to know, he'll relay it to us, and we'll have Mr. Barnes here go for it and give his best answer to it. So write those in if you have them. So we can all agree this was a bad guy, and
yes,
and even though he helped us sometimes, but the things that Iran is accused of doing, even just in recent months, with the attack on the military base that killed an American contractor, you had the attack on the Saudi oil field,
last fall.
Yes. Right, you had the What else? Well, just this week, the American embassy uprising there in
Well, I mean,
Baghdad.
there were protests and very serious, and they sort of, I gather, they breached
The outer wall.
the outer wall, the perimeter.
He's accused of having his hands in all of those things.
Well, you know, Do
you buy that?
it's not inconceivable to me that was aware, for instance, of the efforts to protest at the embassy. He most assuredly, for instance, was aware, if not involved in the planning, of the attack on the oil facilities in Abqaiq and Khurais in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. I mean, look, he's our enemy.
He was.
He was.
He was.
That doesn't mean it was necessarily a great idea to kill him.
And that's what I want to get into.
Yeah, because
what happens now? I mean, does that destabilize everything?
Look, I'm an old-fashioned foreign policy type. Morality plays its part, and we should weep no tears for the loss of such a man. But realistically, though, you always want to ask yourself, what are the consequences of the actions that we are taking? How do they improve our interests in the region? How do they advance a strategy? And that's where I have serious doubts about the killing of Soleimani. Not that it lacks moral justification.
The consequences. You're concerned about
what happens now. Clearly, the Iranians are going to retaliate.
They promised that.
They promised that.
And you believe them?
I believe them. I believe them.
What is that? What do you think what form is that going to take?
Well, that's the big question, right? I mean, that's you ask, because you're a brilliant journalist, you ask the brilliant question, right? Which is, what form will it take? I think the Iranians know they're no match for the United States in terms of conventional weaponry.
They're not sending tanks.
They're not going to send it. They're not going to attack. They're not going to send out the Iranian Navy and attack the U.S. Fleet. And they're probably not going to send out Iranian aircraft to challenge us, because we would sink all their ships and shoot down all their airplanes. Where the Iranians are quite good is in what I mentioned earlier, asymmetric warfare. Warfare in which a weaker side takes on a stronger side. And so I could easily imagine the Iranian government retaliating through its various proxy groups around the Middle East, attack on U.S. facilities, attack on U.S. individuals. I think the Iranians will probably try to avoid doing it directly. If they can, I think they will probably avoid that, although one never knows.
So that you don't see their fingerprints on it.
Well, I mean, it's like everyone will know.
It won't be obvious.
Everyone will know, though.
Right.
Right. Everyone will know.
You think it'll happen soon?
I don't know. I think if the Iranians, I'm sure the Iranians are meditating upon what they want to do. It's also important to recall that although these various proxy groups are in many ways controlled by Iran and certainly influenced by Iran, it's not inconceivable they could lash out in retaliation by themselves.
I think Jaime says we have a question. What is it, Jaime?
And you've kind of been answering, the question I have from a couple of our viewers. I mean, the main question we get is, what are the odds of us going to war? And I think people are thinking, like you said, like we were saying before, war in a traditional sense. But you were already kind of describing that this is, if we did this, wouldn't be sort of conventional, correct?
Well, no. I mean, that's my best guess. But I will say this, that anybody that can predict Iran's reaction to the Soleimani killing should write their views on a piece of 5x8 paper and send it to the president, because a lot of people would like to know. And I'm not mocking the question. Indeed, I'm basically agreeing with the question, which is that the uncertainties here are huge. The uncertainties are vast, and we can have a whole continuum of conflict. This is what we're talking about, essentially, right? A continuum of conflict. That at one end is World War II, and at the other end is shooting an off-duty GI. I'm just giving examples.
Right.
And there's a lot of violence in between. And the question is, where on this scale are we going to end up? It is not impossible that we end up with full-scale conflict with Iran. It depends on what they do. I think it's going to be something less. But it's going to be a scary time for a lot of Americans, and it's going to be a dangerous time at American facilities throughout the region.
So I guess my next question would be actually then, what do you think should be the next move for the U.S. for President Trump and the U.S.?
Well, we've ordered all Americans out of Iraq right now.
and I think
we're trying to protect people.
we're going to, I'm sure, do more additional things. And he just recently sent some more troops in, I think, anyway.
82nd Airborne.
There's some troops there, but this reminds me of an old story, and it's like it's in the piney woods of East Texas, and some guy's just driving. He's totally lost in the piney woods. You know what I mean? He's just driving and driving. He can't find it, and he stops at a gas station and he says, "I'm looking for the Fourth Baptist Church." And the guy at the gas station says, "Well, if I was looking for the Fourth Baptist Church, I wouldn't start here." Well, that's the problem with foreign policy, right? Which is that you have to accept the world that you have. In my opinion, I think that Trump's foreign policy toward Iran has been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. But we find ourselves here now. I would just say any effort through third parties at this point to just talk to Iran would probably serve a useful purpose, just to ensure that miscalculations don't occur. Although, my God, emotions are running high. Emotions are running really, really high.
We've had a tense relationship with Iran going back to at least 79.
At least 79.
You know, when they took over our embassy and held
Yeah.
all those people for over a year.
And many people say it goes all the way back to 53. Right?
Really?
When in 53, we helped organize the overthrow of a democratic leader in Iran.
And installed the Shah?
And installed the Shah. Well, we reinstalled the Shah.
Right, right. So let me ask you about, I know a lot of people watching this either have family or have interest in the oil business here in Houston, and a lot of American companies, have oil fields in that part of the world over there. Local companies, right? Is Exxon over there?
I don't know.
You don't? Okay.
I don't know, and I can't give you details on the number of U.S. employees and U.S. companies specifically involved in Iraq and other oil.
But it's significant.
It's significant, and clearly, those would be targets of opportunity for Iranian-backed proxies of various kinds. I think that people are worried, and I think that there's grounds to be worried. And I'm pretty sure that the security leadership of these major companies are working overdrive today to make sure that their personnel are safe.
Because that would be an obvious target.
Yeah, it would be an obvious target. But let's be honest here: these security people at these oil companies, this is the Middle East we're talking about, right? It's not like they have a little bit of experience with instability.
Right.
This is not Sweden.
Right. Yeah, they're not sitting back with their feet up and going, "Oh, now we're concerned."
Now we're concerned.
Something may happen.
Yeah, because I'm sure that there was a high level of alert that went into effect with the attacks on the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia in the fall. I think that rocked everybody back on their heels.
Would you be concerned if you were planning a trip to the Middle East right now as an American?
Yes.
Anywhere in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think I would a little bit. I'm a hardy soul, and I have no children. And my dog will be taken care of one way or the other. So.
And you'd still be concerned.
I'd be a little bit concerned, but no grounds for panic. But let's see how this sorts out. And of course, I think the most dangerous places are still the places that were most dangerous before, which are Iraq and Syria, and southern Lebanon probably, and parts of the Yemen.
Is it conceivable? I know there's always a chance, but are you concerned significantly about something happening on American soil?
Yeah, I am concerned. I don't think the Iranians have shown much capability to do that in recent years. Although, on the other hand, who would have thought that 18 guys with box cutters would kill 3,000 people?
Right.
Now, I'm not making the comparison here. I have no reason to believe that Iran has that capability in the United States. I'm saying we're in one of those areas that are truly imponderable. I don't have any evidence. I've not seen no evidence or reporting of substantial Iranian, sort of terrorist act planning in the United States, but it's not inconceivable.
Now, Soleimani is not al-Baghdadi. He's not Osama bin Laden in the respect that we had to hunt those guys down.
Right.
And when we found them, we killed them.
Right.
This guy, it sounds like, was under pretty much constant surveillance by at least us and the Israelis.
Right.
And we kind of knew where he was most of the time.
Right.
George W. Bush could have taken him out.
Yes.
Obama could have taken him out.
Yes.
And they didn't.
Right.
And he's been doing this stuff a long time.
Right.
What does that say to you that we've had opportunities and didn't take them? This time we did.
I just think that President Trump is at least insofar as this is concerned, is simply willing to take risks that those previous presidents have not.
Could it be that, and I'm trying to take the politics out of this, but all these recent things that have happened in the last just year, it seems like there have been 3 or 4 or 5 things that this guy is, Soleimani's, blamed or accused of having a hand in. The president, this president, just said enough.
Yeah, I know.
And took him out.
I think they also added the Revolutionary Guards to the terrorism list earlier last year.
Right.
Setting the groundwork. The president, I think, just simply said enough is enough. There's also the question of whether or not there might have been elements in Iraqi intelligence that might have provided some information on his whereabouts. Although the Iraqi government itself has condemned, right? Has condemned our attack.
Secretary of Defense Mark Esper did not rule out preemptive strikes by the U.S. on Iran if they had a good idea that Iran was planning to do something else or retaliate. Does that concern you? I guess it should anytime the Secretary of Defense says it's possible, right?
Yeah, it does. Remember, one has to be very careful. I mean, it's like the old all options on the table, right?
Right. They always are.
They always are.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me be quite blunt with you here. There's very little in President Trump's foreign policy that suggests substantial and deep thinking about the consequences of some of the steps that he has taken. And I'm truly concerned that we have no strategy at this point. That we did this thing, perhaps justifiable, on moral or on defensive grounds. But I'm not. What's the impact here? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to do with this? Are we trying to make Iran buckle? Are we trying to make Iran sign on to a new nuclear deal? Are we hoping that the Iranian regime falls? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? I'm just worried. What is?
It's always more than just taking out a guy.
Yeah, it's always, and like I said, none of us are going to weep for this. None of them are going to weep for this man's loss. But the question is, how does this act last yesterday? How does this act advance the security of the United States?
And that's a question that has to be answered.
And that is a question
we don't know.
We don't know. And I must confess that I have very little confidence in the way that the administration is likely to handle it.
Well, and we have to remember too that for people who don't follow international politics, we've been talking about Iraq. This airstrike happened in Iraq. Iraq and Iran have a very complicated history together. They've been at war once that I know of, and probably many times that I don't. But when you're talking about Iran, you're not talking about the same type of situation that exists in Iraq.
No,
Iran's a much bigger country geographically, a lot more people, and a lot more sophisticated.
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, look, Iraq is a state that has had a lot of problems for a long time. Starting with the Persian Gulf War in '91. Years of misrule under Saddam Hussein, terrible misrule, brutality. Then Saddam Hussein's war against Iran, which we supported. A lot of Americans like to forget that.
He was on our side once.
He was on our side once, and we turned a blind eye when he gassed his citizens. Then, of course, we invaded and got rid of him. And then we created this huge power vacuum, and Iran, to a large extent, moved in. Well, that's Iran is a Shia majority country. Iraq is a Shia majority country, and the Shia assumed great political power after Saddam Hussein's demise.
They're next door neighbors.
Next door neighbor. There were close ties among the clerics between the two countries, and the other thing to remember, just from our point of view, and it's something that's very, very important to recall, is that Iraq is way, 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 way more important to Iran than it is to the United States.
Sure.
I mean, a hostile.
That makes sense.
A hostile Iraq is an existential threat to Iran, and it was proven.
Sure. Yeah, and they're next door. Like I said, they have a lot of similarities.
You know, I always tell
for all
people,
their conflicts.
you know, we are really, really powerful, but sometimes weaker countries can prevail in conflicts because this has been more important for them, right? In other words, they're willing to take the sacrifices, they're willing to spend the time. You know, look what happened in Vietnam.
I was thinking the same thing.
You know, it's like, yeah, well,
How did they prevail there? Well, they
because
cared more.
They cared one hell of a lot more. Now, the thing that really fills me full of sadness about this, at one level, I mean, it is certainly not his death.
Yeah.
It's the fact that, you know, Iraq, which is already undergoing a great deal of instability in recent months because of protests. By the way, a lot of protests are anti-Iranian. Have been anti-Iranian.
Right. Yeah, there's been support for this death, this airstrike.
So, I mean, I think you'll find that the Iranians, that the Iraqis split on the Soleimani killing. Although the government, I think, just simply going to have to condemn it, right? Because it has no choice. But the people I'm sorry for are the Iraqis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to be
More instability.
Well, I know I don't want to pull a Tom Friedman on you here, but I literally took a cab to this interview, and my caddy was an Iraqi.
Really?
And he said, and he said, it's just terrible. He said, you know, and he said, you Americans and you Iranians, you know, he said, you're having a big fight, and guess who's going to suffer?
Right.
It's going to be us Iraqis.
Yeah, he was sad for, and I'm sorry, I'll get to the second time.
Yeah.
He was sad for what it's doing to his country,
Yes.
not for the death of this guy or
Oh
anything
no!
else.
In fact, he was quite delighted that Soleimani had been killed.
Right.
Right. But he was just saying, you know, he said, this is, and it's true. This is a country that can't catch a break.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to Iraq, and there's a huge Iranian population in
Yes,
Houston as
yes,
well that we're
yes.
going to check in with today as well. Jaime, yes.
Yes. So some of the questions that we've kind of been getting is, if there is a response to this, are we talking about a swift response, or is this something that might get drawn out
On Iran's part or our part?
on their part?
On their
Iran's
part.
Yes.
I think it could be. I think Iran is capable of showing strategic patience, and I think you may see a couple small things, but I wouldn't be surprised if we can see this thing unfolding over upcoming weeks and months. But again, a lot depends on what we do, right? In other words, the Iranians have agency, right? They can make decisions. By the way, they can make mistakes. And one of the terrible things about we Americans is that we sometimes assume that our opponents are all brilliant geniuses. They're not. They make mistakes like we do, right? And the Iranians have agency, and we have agency, which means it's that we will be responding to how they respond. And you get yourself in this dynamic, which is really hard to predict. It's
Sure.
really, really
A tit
hard
for tat, yeah.
It's just really, really hard to predict.
Anything else people are asking? The big question is, what do you think will happen now? And that's just impossible to know.
I think that's kind of just the question people have, and I think they're just concerned over, will this escalate, and how, what it can escalate into. Just a concern, and what maybe people can expect.
And you said you thought conventional war was out because that's just a no-win.
I thought it was unlikely. Although once the dynamic sets in, it's hard to know where it ends, right? I mean, I think it's unlikely. But if you'd asked me 24 hours ago if I thought it was likely that we would kill Soleimani by drone, I would have said I think it's unlikely.
Yeah. And here we are.
Here we are. There you saw it. For the first time in known history, an academic is admitted to being in error.
You know what? That's where I want to leave it. We promised to keep you a half hour. Our half hour is up. Joe Barnes is the Bonner Means Baker Fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Spent 15 years at the State Department, clearly watches this stuff for a living and lived it for 15 years, and we appreciate your expertise, sir.
It's a delight to be here today.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for watching, everybody. We'll keep trying to answer those questions as they come in after Mr. Barnes leaves, and we'll see you on the 411 coming up later today. Have a good one.